Hey guys, welcome to installment 2 of our notes on the founding of our national government. We've started with the Articles of Confederation, but if you remember from yesterday, it didn't work out well at all. They couldn't tax, they could only borrow money and soldiers. The PowerPoint isn't working. There it is. Okay. And they didn't have the ability to demand soldiers for an army. They weren't able to regulate trade between the states. They couldn't coin money. It was just ridiculous. So not going to work. This is the last slide that we looked at yesterday. Reasons for a new constitution. What I just told you, the national government is too weak. The states aren't working together because the states have ultimate authority. They don't want to give that authority to the federal government. Nationalists are concerned that the nation is going to fail. And then, of course, the straw that broke the camel's back, Shays Rebellion. So I hope you guys read that document on Shays Rebellion yesterday, Thomas Jefferson's version, as well as what the textbook had to say about it. And I look forward to discussing that when I return on Tuesday. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to see you. You're going to watch that on your own time. I put the link in the CTLS digital session. Okay. So we are at number 4 in your note-taking guide, the Constitutional Convention. I'd like you to know that this took place in May through September of 1787, and it was held in Philadelphia, just like the Declaration of Independence was written there, just like the Articles of Confederation were written there, just like the Continental Congress met there. Philadelphia, it's kind of a big deal. It's going to serve as our nation's capital for a little bit. 12 states went. Yep, 12. Rhode Island did not go. So that might be a little bit of trivia for you to write out to the side. And don't forget, if I'm going too fast, just pause it and you can fill it in later. And if you want to speed me up and make me, like John Green speed for Crash Course, that's fine. Wouldn't recommend it, but that's fine. And the WHO, it's 55 men, white, college educated, landowning Christian males. Thomas Jefferson called it an assembly of demigods. Did y'all read those Percy Jackson books growing up? If you did, you know what a demigod is, half man, half God. But really, Alexander Hamilton, George Washington, James Madison, Ben Franklin, that's not a bad description of these men, their contributions to our nation and their capabilities. And of course, they are meeting to revise the Articles of Confederation. That word is so important. Please make sure that you very clearly are writing revise in your notes. And just think of it this way. If you handed in a paper for me that you were supposed to write, and I said, I've made a few, suggestions for revision. I'm not asking you to completely redo it. Just make a couple changes. And that's what they were there to do. They were there to make a couple changes to the Articles of Confederation, and they ended up scrapping it and starting over. Really, the amount of stuff that they kept from the Articles of Confederation and the Constitution is teeny tiny, just like a minuscule amount. It is a completely different government, no longer Confederate in form. The national government has the power, not the states. So, wow, big departure from what they were supposed to do. The how, they're meeting in a closed door environment. They're not going to let, the regular public in or let the regular public know what they're doing because they don't want their input. This is something I'm going to talk about with you guys next year if you take AP Government. The Founding Fathers were kind of, they were elitist. They didn't trust the American public at the time. Which is why the only office the American public could directly elect at the beginning of the nation was the House of Representatives, not senators, and still not President of the United States. Was that a good thing that they didn't trust them? That's debatable. And of course, we'll debate that next year. But really, they just didn't want people to come in. They didn't want their opinions. In fact, they went so far as to hire a babysitter for Ben Franklin, literally a babysitter. It wasn't that he was crazy old at the time, which he was over 80. Which for back then is a rarity, but also he liked to stop off and grab a beer on his way home, and he would just become a chatty Cathy and just, talk about things that were going on. So they had somebody escort him to ensure that that didn't happen. And the why, they are meeting to create a stronger central government. For the most part, people are on board with that. The ridiculousness of Shays' rebellion, the reality that we could not suppress a rebellion of angry farmers with pitchforks, has hit home for the nation, and we know we need a stronger central government. But how strong? That's the question. And the father of the Constitution, thank goodness for James Madison. All 5 feet 4 inches of him. Love this man because he kept a diary, and he's the only reason why we know what went on at the Constitutional Convention. Just imagine somebody like live tweeting it. That's essentially what James Madison did. Except, you know, you could read it later, not at the time, because they didn't want input. Okay, let's move on. And this is just showing you the various plans that are going to be proposed. We're going to talk about these. Okay, so number 5, different plans proposed. You have got the Virginia plan. So right out of the bat, 2 delegates from Virginia, Edmund Randolph, the governor, and James Madison, proposed the Virginia plan to set up the new government. All right. And it's immediately a departure from the Articles of Confederation because it proposes a bicameral legislature. So 2 houses. If you recall, under the Articles of Confederation, there was only 1 house in Congress, but this has 2. And they wanted the houses to be figured according to population. So the more people you have, the more seats you would get in the government. And hopefully you guys get it. That means the more voice you would have, the more power you would have. Okay. Big deal. BFD, like that. Okay. Like I said, it was created by Edmund Randolph and James Madison. And this government that they proposed did have the power to tax, did have the power to regulate trade, did have a president and a judicial system. So again, huge departure from the Articles of Confederation that did not have either of those things. And they proposed a strong executive, which is going to make some people a little hesitant because they're going to get flashes of George III and tyranny. So there you go. That's the Virginia plan. It benefited large states because they got more of a say in the government. And you have the New Jersey plan, also known as the small state plan, because this is going to benefit small states, and you'll see why in just a second. It's created by William Paterson. I know you want to say Patterson. I do too. And he proposed a unicameral legislature, so keeping the Articles of Confederation Congress, and with 1 state having 1 vote. So just like the Articles, everybody's equal. It doesn't matter how many people live there. Okay. Like the Virginia plan, though, this one did say that the federal government should be able to tax, could be able to regulate trade, and did have a president and a court system. Unlike a strong executive, like a singular executive under the Virginia plan, Paterson proposed an executive council. This idea that a lot of people would meet together to make these big decisions to better guard against us, you know, falling back into tyranny again with an absolute ruler like we just fought to leave. Okay. So obviously you've got 2 different things here, right? You've got a plan that benefits large states, a plan that benefits small states. We're going to have to compromise, and compromise they did. And they actually came up with a pretty dang good compromise. It's so good. We call it the Great Compromise. I'm not even kidding. So the Great Compromise is the solution to the plan, and it is a compromise on representation. Okay, how the people are represented in the government. And what they created was a bicameral legislature. We have it today. It's our Congress today. There's equal representation in the Senate. Every state has 2. So that means we have a grand total of anybody? 100. We do. So 100, that's exciting. And if we get another state, it'll be 102. And then it's based on population in the House. So if you are a state that has more people, you're going to get more representation in the House of Representatives. For example, California has 53 representatives. Wyoming has 1. Alaska has 1. Georgia has 14. It just depends on how many people live there. Okay. This was created by a guy named Roger Sherman. Whoops. But then he didn't say that. He's from Connecticut. So sometimes you might see this referred to as the Connecticut Compromise. They could tax. There was a president and a court system with a strong executive, and they could enforce trade. So framework for the government. There you go. We don't have to figure out anything else, right? Wrong. We do, because we said that the more people you have, the more votes you get. What about the southern states that have a lot of people living there, but those people don't vote? Y'all know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about slavery. And ladies and gentlemen, this is not one of our shining moments in history. This is embarrassing. This is sad. But this does connect to where we are today with a few other things that I'll explain next year in government. So the Three-Fifths Compromise. What does the South want to do? They want slaves to count for their population. Duh. Because that way they get more voice, more votes, more seats in the government. What does the North say? No. Not bro. And they do say bro because it's just men talking here. Women are not represented at this point. You guys know this. So the North says, no, that's a bunch of crap. You don't consider them people. You don't pay taxes for them. And all of a sudden now you want them to count when you get more voice, more power in the government because they live there and you have this horrible institution. No, that's messed up. So again, one side wants this, another side wants this. We got to meet in the middle and we compromise. So out of every 5 slaves, 3 will count towards population. Hence the very originally named Three-Fifths Compromise. Also, the South got the North to say that the slave trade wouldn't be discussed for 20 years, like, Congress stopping it. And the South also dropped their demands, requiring that all votes pass with a 2/3 vote, because the South would be more likely to get 2/3 because they'll have more seats for a while than the North would. So at this point, the South has more power in the government. I hope you guys are realizing that. Also, is anybody else disturbed that I'm already talking about the North versus the South? I mean, WTF, why the face, right? It's ridiculous. But yet here we are. Three-Fifths Compromise. Illustrated. Don't worry about that. Next up, separation of powers. And you're watching a video on this. 2 videos on this. One TED Ed and one, get ready for it, Schoolhouse Rock. Yes. So excited. I am going to save the preamble for later. And yes, if you want to perform the preamble for me, I'll throw a couple bonus points your way. Why not? Why not? All righty. So separation of powers and checks and balances. Thanks to Baron de Montesquieu, Montesquieu, we have this idea to split up government power and to separate it among 3 branches. So the national government has all of this power, but now we're splitting it into power for the executive, power for the legislative, and power for the judicial, which makes sense. It makes sense. And not only do we separate the power, but also written in the Constitution are examples of how each branch can check the other branch and make sure they're not getting too powerful. Okay. And we call that checks and balances, to keep one branch from getting too powerful. Like a president from turning into a king, right? So a couple of examples. Let's just kind of look at what they do and what are some examples of checks and balances. And we'll do this a lot more next year. And I mean, a lot more. So the executive branch, what do they do with laws? They enforce them. They carry them out, whichever way you want to say it. And who's in the executive branch? Well, that's the president. Also the bureaucracy, but that's okay for right now. At this point in the nation, it's just the president. Okay. An example of some checks and balances, they can veto acts of Congress, which means Congress passes a law, and if the president doesn't care for it, they can say no, and it stops. It's donezo. Also, to check the judicial branch, they get to appoint judges to the Supreme Court. That's the only way you get on the Supreme Court, is if you're appointed by the president. Okay, so that's the executive branch. The legislative branch is made up of Congress. That's who's in it. All of those representatives and senators. And what do they do with laws? They write them. They do. They write them. Now, to check the president, they can actually legit impeach and remove the president from office. And you guys saw the House of Representatives really try to do this to President Trump twice. I mean, he was impeached twice, not removed, just impeached. Also, they don't have to approve judges. So that's like another check on the executive, but also check on the judicial branch. They can say no if the president proposes somebody they don't like. And then the judicial branch, what do they do with laws? They interpret them. They determine whether or not they are constitutional. I don't know if you guys saw this in the news, but there's a Texas law which some people say is restricting abortion. It's certainly making it less available than it was. And the Supreme Court just weighed in on it a couple of days ago. If you're interested, look it up. So they interpret the laws. Who's in it? It's all the federal judges, and there's a bunch, like a bunch. But at the time of the Constitution, it was just the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court, okay? Now, to check the executive branch, they can declare presidential actions unconstitutional. So if Joe Biden passes some executive order that they think is overreaching and kind of getting into the legislative branch's power, they can say, sorry, can't do that. That's unconstitutional. So that's a solid check, right? They can do the same thing for Congress. They can declare laws by Congress to be unconstitutional as well. And they do on occasion. So I hope that makes sense. I included links for you to watch these in the CTLS digital session, also where this is linked. So, that's where you find it. And these are just some, for your information, make sure everybody's on the same page. You guys should know that a first president of our nation who is on the $1 bill is, of course, George Washington. He was elected unanimously, only president to have that distinction, by the way. Kind of cool. James Monroe was also going to have that distinction. So one elector said no on purpose, even though he liked James Madison. He just wanted Washington to be the only unanimous. I think that's fun. Who was his vice president at the time? He's the second president. He defended the Redcoats after the Boston Massacre. He was a cousin to the founder of the Sons of Liberty. I'm talking about John Adams. And then just a little bit more information for you that you might find interesting that's in the Constitution that the Founding Fathers felt important to spell out. How do you become a representative? You got to be 25, 7 years old. No, you got to be 25 and a citizen for 7 years. And you've got to live in the state where you're chosen. To be a senator, and again, pause me if I'm going too fast. Here, I'll give you an awkward face to pause. Or happy face. To be a senator, you've got to be 30, a citizen for 9 years, and again, live in the state where you're chosen. For the president, it's a little bit different. You got to be 35, a 14-year resident, but a natural born citizen, meaning you must be born on American soil, which is interesting. We'll talk more about it next year. And how do you become a Supreme Court justice? There are no qualifications. Wyatt, my 2-year-old son, could become a Supreme Court justice. I mean, isn't that weird? I mean, obviously he's not going to become a Supreme Court justice because, I mean, who would do that? What president in their right mind would want, a 2-year-old to be president? But there's just nothing formal. It's just, completely up to the person who they want. So it's probably a good thing that Wyatt can't become a Supreme Court justice at this point because he's crazy. He's crazy, guys. He's absolutely nuts, but he's real cute. I mean, look at that face. So cute. They wouldn't get anything done. They'd be talking about how cute he is all the time. Okay, let's take a minute to fill this in. Principles of the Constitution. I'm going to go quickly through this. Popular sovereignty means that the people are the source of the government's power. Remember that part from the Declaration of Independence? The government derives its powers from the consent of the governed. That's that. Okay, so as a principle in the Constitution, it's very clear to see throughout. Limited government is the idea that the government only has the powers that the Constitution gives it. If there's not something spelled out in the Constitution, it's a right of the people or a right of the states. Okay, and those are later amendments we'll talk about. Separation of powers, I feel like we got that one. Government's powers divided among those two branches. This concept of federalism, I'll get more into that with you guys later, but or next year. But it's just the idea that the federal government has power and state governments have some power as well. State governments were not, completely castrated. I mean, they were left with some things. Checks and balances, this idea that every branch has the power to limit the actions of the other two. And then representative government, the idea that we elect people to speak on our behalf in the federal government. Okay. So let's compare the two. Let's see, they sat out with the idea of revising the articles. Let's see if they did that or if they ended up completely rewriting it. I'm guessing you know which way we're going. So the Articles of Confederation, a loose confederation of 13 states, would that make it a weak or strong central government? Weak, absolutely. Whereas under the Constitution, it's made up of 13 states under one centralized government, making it a very strong central government, still is today. Under the Articles of Confederation, the representatives to Congress were chosen by state legislators. So we have a state assembly in Georgia. Just imagine them picking folks. Under the Constitution, who chooses the representatives? That would be the people. Representatives are directly elected by the people, meaning we vote for them. Your representative for District 6 in Georgia is Lucy McBath. Okay. How many votes did each state get under the Articles? 1. Under the Constitution, it's a little bit, there's more to it than that. In the Senate, it's equal, 2 per state. But in the House, HOR, it's based on population. Could the Articles tax or coin money? No. Can the Constitution? Yes. Did the Articles have an executive or judicial branch? No. Did the Constitution? Yes. So there you go. Very different. I'd say that they did more than revise. We'll do that when I get back. And when was the Constitution signed? That would be September 17th, 1787, which is why we're having a party on September 17th, which is the day of the pep rally. Hopefully it happens. And yeah, guys, we will pick up with that next week. Good job. Good job. I know that was, all kinds of fun for you. Anyway, hope everybody's doing okay. Enjoy your weekend, enjoy your youth, make smart decisions, and I will see you next week.